Good evening, and welcome to the November 4th, 2024 meeting of the Grafton Planning Board. We'll begin our agenda, before we begin our agenda, because at least one member of the board is participating remotely, we will perform a roll call. Justin Wood.
Present.
Prabhu Venkatraman.
Present.
Bob Hassinger.
I'm here.
Greg Delamole.
Present.
David Robbins is present. We also have with us staff, planner Fiona Coughlin.
Present.
Assistant planner Natalia Allward.
Present.
With one too many mics.
That emphasizes that Natalia is present. So I want to make sure we heard it. Okie dokie. Let us begin our agenda with our first agenda item, as always, public input. If you have anything you wish to bring up before the planning board that is not already on the agenda this evening, now would be the time to raise your hand, either here in the meeting room or on Zoom. And seeing no raised hands, we'll move on to our action item agenda, of which we have one action item, a request to release the bond for Gristmill Village, which was recently, the streets and utilities having been recently accepted at town meeting. Fiona, can you tell us what's going on here?
Yeah,
What we
absolutely.
need to do?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So this evening, the developer of Gristmill Village, also known as Millstone Drive, the subdivision that was accepted at town meeting this past town meeting, is looking to have the remainder of their bond released, that 20% that the board always holds as security. It's about $150,000. This is pending. The developer is seeking a bond release and will need to get, following this meeting this evening, get certification from the town clerk for the Mylar and the deed, and then file at the registry. So we don't have the registry receipt in hand yet because the developer tried to make an appointment with the clerk and they've been completely swamped with the election. So they have an appointment this Thursday and are planning on getting all of that final paperwork wrapped up, and they'll send us the receipt. But there's no issue with moving forward with this evening because they'll have to do that anyway for filing purposes. So this is just part of the process. Once a subdivision is complete and accepted, this is the kind of final step. So all of the board will recall, all of the steps that we took with this determination of completeness. The subdivision was found complete. Select board voted to lay out the road, and then the planning board referred the subdivision to town meeting where it was again approved. So again, just part of the process. There's required to make a formal request for review. So I would just recommend that something regarding the the forthcoming clerk certification is included.
How about if I move that we release the bond pending receipt of the appropriate paperwork?
Upon receipt of proof of recording, the bond shall be released.
Something like that.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion? Justin?
My only discussion is I'm not always a fan of doing an action pending something with an undeterminate actual time frame. I'm sure the applicant likes to get this done sooner than later, but if for some reason they don't have the full certification from the clerk for 6 months, what are we doing and looking at on this? So I might recommend a amendment to the motion of within 1 month of receipt. We receive it within 1 month of today's meeting.
I don't see any
Paperwork and then-
harm with the way we did that.
Okay.
They don't get their money until we get our documentation. It's however long they take.
Yep.
They'll probably be interested in getting it done fairly quickly since they've been interested in getting their bond money.
Yeah, so the sense of the motion is that when we receive proof, when when the planning board receives proof that the documents were recorded, at that point, the money can be released.
Well,
When-
it's a receipt. It's an actual receipt.
Yes. We get the receipt. And so,
Yeah,
one
I'm
might
comfortable
suspect
before you.
the
It's just I wanted to raise a thought.
One might suspect the applicant would be motivated to get that done promptly. On the other hand, it's no skin off our back if the applicant waits a year. We're holding onto the money for another year, but
I
keep
don't
it simple, right?
I'm gonna bet that that doesn't happen.
I think you're right. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Dalamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Takes care of that. We now have a discussion item, a progress update. The board may recall that we, kind of as a last minute request, we approved a 60-day extension of a temporary certificate of occupancy. We are approaching the end of the 60-day period. We're not there yet. Mr. Villatore here has a progress report for us as to how things are going with satisfying all the items that the building inspector had listed that needed to be completed before. As I recall, this is things that need to be done before a permanent certificate of occupancy can be issued.
Correct.
So where are you at?
Excuse me. Thank you again for having me here. We addressed the biggest one, which took a little bit of maneuvering, which was the sign. Unfortunately, it was tough to get a company to act on it as quickly as I know the urgency was there. So I took it upon myself with our contractor, and we moved it ourselves. So it is in compliance. It took a little bit of understanding the correct setback. Tracy was very good in letting us know exactly what that setback was going to be, because it was a little bit of a challenge. We did get some of the other parts ordered. However, we're in the process of meeting again with our engineer and then the town engineer to go over some of the items that were mentioned in the plan request, to make sure that we're addressing them appropriately. There were some items that came up during the construction period up to the last site visit that it appears can be worked out with some proper engineering and redesign, but we want to make sure that that's done correctly. So we're having a meeting with Graves Engineering, I believe next week. Is that right? Did we confirm? Yes. Yeah. So we're moving things along as fast as we can, but we do need a little bit of the input from the engineering teams to make sure that we're doing things right. Does that sound right for you? I know there was some other. I know that was the bulk of it, and wanted to make sure that we keep moving it forward, I guess, is the key.
Fiona.
Mr. Chair. Yep, that's a perfect summary. Thanks, Alan. Appreciate it. We are, as Alan said, we're going to meet on the site on the 12th with Graves Engineering, the contractor and design team, to do a walkthrough and go through our checklist. The checklist was, as Alan referred to, from the prior meeting materials. It's just predominantly like plantings, some site work, and we're just going to go through that, and then I'll produce a report and kind of be touching base with Tracy after the fact. I want to thank you for moving the sign. Looks good. And I went through and I have kind of all my ducks in a row ready for that site visit, as does Graves Engineering. And other than that kind of final check in terms of compliance with the special permit conditions, we're really just, we're waiting for the outcome of the site walk, and everything else is satisfied. So in terms of our specific planning board special permit, we're just waiting on that final sign off. And so we're looking forward to that, and I want to thank the applicant again for working together with us to move this along.
So I plan on coming back again, once we get that next meeting, and then I guess just continue the updating.
So the temporary certificate of occupancy actually expires, my notes say 60 days from September 30th,
Yes, so that,
which would put it at November 29th.
yes. Oh, okay. I had a slightly different date, but that same week. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so, and we do have a meeting prior to November 29th.
Correct.
On the 25th, so. I guess worst case, if things don't quite get done you would be possibly looking for an additional extension on the temporary CO.
That's correct. I think a lot of it is incumbent upon what the outcome is of the engineering teams really coming together so we can address the items the right way. One of the wonderful things about the industry is that it's changed so much, and even in the original planning, I think the state was really looking at items to secure things like a fence, which are no longer a requirement. And so, in the original planning, I think that was one of the items that was in there. We've gone through now; we've identified items that no longer are necessary. So we want to make sure we address them correctly with the engineering teams involved.
All right, so all that having said, this is a good progress report. We don't yet have kind of a final reading on where you're at, but by the time of our next meeting, we'll know whether you need any more time to, your ultimate objective, as I said, I believe I understand, is to have everything completed to the point where you can get a real certificate of occupancy.
That's yes, correct.
Any questions from the board?
So we don't need to vote anything tonight.
I believe so.
Just one thing.
Sure.
I've noticed, talking about signs, you know what I mean when I say a shark fin sign? It's one of those things that stands up,
Oh yes, yeah.
those aren't allowed, at least without a sign permit. And I've seen some, I think I've seen some in yours. I know I've been seeing a number of signs not far from you, right along the road. So just be aware of that.
Okay. Thank you.
So, yes.
Mr. Chair.
Justin?
So I have a few questions around this just to make sure I'm understanding things right. First off, Fiona, your understanding from Tracy prior to today anyway, is the biggest issue was the sign compliance from her. And that is resolved to staff's understanding at this point?
So the most pressing issue at the time was the relocation of the sign, and that has been rectified, and Tracy signed off on that.
Okay.
There's still some other site work specific items that are kind of more granular engineering
Yes.
pieces that we need to work through, but
So the
to be sure.
the driveway top coat is that a condition that relates to the temporary certificate of occupancy, or does that, or in practice could that not be done and he still get a full CO?
That has to be done.
Okay. So unless he's doing a top coat for paving this month, then we're looking to likely be extending at least for that.
Yes, and I think the biggest issue on that was the parking lot itself with the redrawing of the lines was going to need to be some revisiting, because I think we were going to be removing some parking spots to make it more feasible for vehicles entering, specifically I think it was fire trucks. So that's part of the redesign on the engineering.
Understood.
There,
The last question I have is, I admit I did not reread the full decision before this meeting, so my memory is based on just the time I was in the meetings. The fence, my recollection was that it was not only a CCC requirement, but it was something our chief of police had expressed a desire or need to have in place. And I thought we may have put that in our conditions directly. So if it is in our conditions that we need the fence, then we will need to do a modification. I haven't looked at this before this meeting today, but that's something I want to validate. And if I needed to make a vote on moving the fence, I'd want the chief of police's, the current chief of police, to sign off on that change. And my understanding from how the industry has shifted, it's not going to be an issue, but that's just something I would want to have in our documentation if we need to make that change.
Mr. Chair, I could just respond to that
Yeah.
briefly. So Justin, I think that the fencing details are encompassed in a more general condition about the security plan. and the security plan has been uploaded to the viewpoint permitting system. The decision doesn't specifically call out fencing,
Okay.
but that's something that the board can consider.
Yeah. How? Good, Bob. I see you line
No,
to speak.
you finish. Something about change in parking spaces. Has that been looked at?
No, not yet. We're going to wait for the site walk to see what the consensus is from their contractor and get more information
'Cause
before we advise.
the number of spaces is, part of the permitting.
Right, but
Although I noticed that you seem to have more than enough spaces.
That's correct.
I drive by there. What have I seen? 4 or 5 cars at the most. Maybe. Of course, I don't. The times I go by are probably not the busy time. But when's the last time your parking lot filled up
When
for
we
that
have-
celebration thing?
Yeah, whenever we have events, but typically, to your point, I believe we had more than enough to cover the amount
Yeah.
that we're planning
The
on losing.
problem is that there's a rule.
Sure.
yeah,
I should correct myself. For some reason, I wrote down dates in my notes wrong. The 60-day extension was voted by the board on September 23rd, which puts 60 days up at November 22nd, which is 3 days before our next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure when I was writing my
Yeah,
notes where I got September 30th
For some reason, I
from.
thought it was the 30th as well, but I must have misread it.
yeah. I have the 22nd in my notes too.
Yes, it was. Yes, the meeting where we voted the extension was September 23rd. And
Was
I
it
think that was
from the meeting date?
and I think
Yes.
that was the day. That was the date. That's why we had to take it up at that meeting. Was the temporary CO that was in place was about to expire on that day.
Right. So the expiration takes place after the next meeting. Is that correct?
Just before. So our next meeting is the 25th.
Oh.
So
okay. Apologize.
we're trying to get ahead of it,
I
so then
misunderstood
you
the
can-
date. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Do we have, there isn't any reserve parking in this plan, is there?
I don't believe so. No, let me.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking, if you unmark some parking spaces, we might be able to designate them under reserve parking so that they could be remarked if it was necessary. Okay?
Mr. Chair, hearing that his temporary CO expires earlier than we were thinking when we looked at this, would you as chair of the board be interested in a motion to take up a temporary CO extension until November 26th, so the day after our next meeting, as an emergency item tonight? I mean, just to ask, I'd be open to it, but I don't know what the board's feeling on that is.
I wonder how necessary it is. Because it'll either be done on the 23rd or not. If he is, it's moot. But,
I mean, although it's labeled as a discussion item on the agenda, that is, the topic is on the agenda, and arguably a motion to extend the temporary CO for an additional, say, 3 or 4 days might be in order.
we might have a motion to take it up as an emergency item, because we have a bylaw besides, which I think still mentions emergency. And you have to do something to declare, or to, from before the open meeting law existed.
Are we making this more complicated than it needs
Yes.
to be?
That was my main point.
mean-
Maybe I wonder if we could authorize the chair to grant a 3-day, 4-day extension if it becomes necessary. Think so?
I don't see a problem with that.
So moved.
If
I'll
that-
second it.
If that's what the board wishes to do, moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye, although he's doing that, taking something on himself.
Well, you never do that, so,
Yeah, motion carried unanimously. We will, we'll make sure that one way or another we can get you to the, if necessary, we can get you to the next board meeting.
So
Follow
the
up.
date of that is the 25th. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
We don't want you to have to shut down for the weekend,
thank you very
if
much.
it should come to that. But with any luck, you'll have, you maybe have been able to apply for a permanent CO by then.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I'm looking forward to having a meeting with everybody so we can hash it out and just move it along.
Yeah, so, keep us up to date, and hopefully we can wrap this little detail up for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Thank you.
Okie dokie, all right, we've got 7:22.
bills.
We do seem to have some bills that need to be
Yeah.
paid.
I move that we authorize payment of the bills.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we pay the bills. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We have minutes of the October 7th meeting before us for review and approval.
Someone said something.
It was
Natalie?
just unmuted.
Natalie.
I was hearing something that, okay,
Move we approve the minutes as drafted.
Second.
moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as drafted. Any discussion? I have nothing. I didn't see anything I wanted to change. So with no discussion, Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We have 7 minutes before our hearing time, so
You have to skip over correspondence.
I'm thinking, asking if Fiona has a staff report.
Oh, it's staff report.
Sure.
That's not on here. That's my problem.
I don't really. Since the last time we met just a week ago, it's been a little hectic, just kind of getting through, decision writing and kind of the more administrative things. But one thing that I will say is we do have a bit of interest in the associate member position. 2 applicants. Just a gentle reminder that joint hearing with the select board is on the 12th in the evening at 7:00.
Did you say we do have?
We do have two interested applicants. As of this morning, I confirmed with the TA's office this morning, and then our joint hearing is on the 12th.
Can we share who they are?
Yes, I think so. I don't see an issue with that. It's public record. Ray Mead, former select board member Ray Mead, and a gentleman named Larry Peschik, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. I read his application, and I think he's a state attorney. So 2 competent and qualified candidates. So it's really exciting.
And what time is the joint meeting? 7?
7.
7. I don't know for sure what time our specific item is on. I think they typically try and bump us closer to 7 so we can do what we need to do, and then they can move on with their regular business. So,
Okay.
yeah. I do have one other interesting, fun thing where I'm going to the Southern New England American Planning Association conference this Thursday and Friday, where I'll be a panelist discussing our wayfinding and branding plan. So excited. Town of Grafton alongside the town of Acton, who did a similar project to us. So looking forward to that.
Where is that?
It is in Springfield. Springfield. Yep. It's typically, I think that whenever it's Massachusetts' turn out of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, they usually will have it in Springfield. So kind of been preparing for that, and getting ready to go. So, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions about anything specific. If we have some time.
Any questions for Fiona?
Anything else?
Moving on then, our agenda, is there anything in correspondence that caught anybody's eye? There. Since it was only a week since our last meeting, there's not a lot of correspondence. Okay. While we are waiting for 7:30, are there any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
Well, I'll point out that Natalia's passed on a number of things that have come out of CMRPC recently, opportunities to participate in various programs and activities and maybe some learning. And don't know whether I'm going to make them because I spend enough time with CMRPC. But they're probably good, probably quite good. I'm not sure whether any of the training stuff that's put on by
CPTC, Citizen Planner Training Collaborative.
right. I'm not sure whether any of that is currently pending, but that's always good for.
Yeah, they have recently sent us out a notice of several upcoming trainings. It's pretty much their standard set of trainings for particularly valuable for new board members or refreshers for older board members. And as I recall, the CPTC trainings generally, I think lately, at least the ones I've attended, have all been via Zoom. But they cost $35, which the town would be willing to pay for you if you wanted to sign up for it. So if you haven't already looked at those, I know several emails have come out recently about that, but well worth your while if there's a topic that you think you might want to know more about. Other than that,
I moved it
Oh.
to 7:30.
Of note, CPC, the agenda items that we brought to town meeting for CPC all passed. And so we have a few new projects that are taking place. And this Thursday in Conference Room A, there is the CPC meeting, which is still open to the public, but is going to be specifically a training session from the CPC. I forget the exact title, but he's the administrator for the state for the CPA program. Stuart, I believe, is the one that's going to be doing it for us, and he's going to do a little bit of a training session. We invited some neighboring communities to join. I don't know offhand which ones are coming, but it's still an open to the public meeting, so anyone can still come. But that's the only thing on our agenda for Thursday at 7.
all right, if there's nothing else, then it's close enough to 7:30. My clock says it's about 10 seconds away, so we will begin our public hearing agenda. A request for a modification of the special permit and site plan approval, 232 Worcester Street, formerly known as 244 Worcester Street.
Sorry. So, yeah, this is different than you guys.
Mr. Donahue is
Oh,
representing.
there you go. Staying busy.
I think he's representing both
Mouths
There
to
you go.
feed.
Yeah, we spent a lot of time with Mr. Donahue a couple of years ago on the
Excellent.
244 Worcester Street. So
right.
read the legal notice.
Okay, the Grafton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, November 4th, 2024, commencing at 7:30 PM in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider an application for a modification of a special permit to update the location address and to extend the period of validity as per condition 6 of the decision dated April 12th, 2022, and recorded in the Worcester Registry of Deeds in Book 71138, page 1, on property located at 232 Worcester Street, FKA 244 Worcester Street, and shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 35, Lot 1.A. Said property is located in the office/light industrial and industrial and priority development overlay zoning district. The applicant is Churchill and Banks Companies LLC, and the owner is C&V 99 Chestnut LLC. A copy of the application and plan is available for public inspection at the planning department during the regular business hours or on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the planning department development project webpage.
Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Mark Donahue from Fletcher Tilton on behalf of the applicant. Some board members might recall the time we spent together in 2021, 2022. To refresh your recollection, in September of 2021, the application for this warehouse and distribution facility at then 244 Worcester Street was filed with this board. A number of public hearings were conducted, and that resulted in a decision of this board to grant the special permit that was filed with the town clerk in April of 2022. Subsequent to the filing of that decision, appeal was taken by parties in interest to the Massachusetts Land Court, and Churchill and Banks had to make a decision whether to proceed with the acquisition of the property from Wyman Gordon at that time, and elected to proceed even while the appeal was pending with that acquisition. That appeal was resolved by agreement with the plaintiffs. That stipulation of dismissal was filed in January of 2023. That coincided pretty closely with a significant increase in interest rates and a decrease in the interest of the marketplace for large warehouse and distribution facilities. Recall that this building is approximately 340,000 square feet, designed for a single tenant. There were, when we started this process, a number of users who were in the marketplace. Some have gone away, others have found a place to go in some fashion. And I'm sure you can appreciate that you need a confluence of events of available capital, either through equity or debt, and a tenant who needs 340,000 square feet to make it all match. That hasn't happened yet, although there continue to be a number of good discussions with people. On another side, we also still have to work through the MassDOT process for the dual, you might recall that we're using dual access here for the driveways through a configuration that we discussed, and it was a condition of approval. We continue to work with MassDOT on that, expect that we'll reach the end result, but haven't quite got there. So for all of those reasons, we believe that good cause exists for the extension as is permitted by the statute in the event of a special permit. And we would respectfully ask the board to extend the date for substantial commencement of the work to begin to January 15th, 2027, which is essentially a 2-year extension.
Do you have anything you wanted to add, Fiona?
I don't. I think Mark did a good job summarizing. I think the main thing is, the subject of this discussion this evening is just the extension, as well as kind of formalizing in the permitting process the address change, which has already essentially occurred. And I touched base with the assessor to make sure that she was aware that this is coming before us if she had any concerns, and she did not. It's basically been finalized and been finalized for quite some time, but just for our record keeping, we want to be as thorough as possible and make sure that's documented at the registry and all of that. So I don't have anything else to add, really.
Any questions, comments from the board? Bob?
Remind me what the bylaw says about, or what we say in our decisions about how long you can go how soon you have to start. You have to start, exercising
Sure.
the special permit.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. There's a specific condition of approval, and what it provides is that the permit, this, and recall there's a special permit and site plan approval, as you know, will lapse within 2 years from the
Yep.
date of expiration of the appeal period. That's the reason for the extension from April to January. If substantial use or construction has not commenced, except in accordance with the law, any request for an extension of such period of validity shall be considered a modification which led to this filing.
I understand that, but I'm talking about normally, what our, seems to me that 1 year. It seems to me it's 1 year normally.
Mr. Chair. I may-
Yeah,
I was looking through some prior special permit extensions, and the board does typically grant for 1 year.
Right.
That's the normal. That's kind of standard process that you have, but there's nothing in the bylaw that says you have to do that.
We've always had the 1 year, but I thought that was set down someplace, in the bylaws. You don't remember.
yeah, so there's two points in the, let me see where this is a special permit and site plan approval. So for site plan approvals, section 1.3.3.8 says that an approved site plan shall be valid for a period of 2 years from the date of approval. Also that work must be completed within 2 years of the date of approval of a site plan, unless a longer period is expressly granted in writing at the time of plan approval. Now, for a special permit, we go to section 1.5.8, which says that major residential special permits shall be valid for a maximum of 2 years. All other special permits shall lapse 1 year after the date of granting if substantial use or construction has not been commenced except in accordance with law. Now, off the top of my head, and I didn't think to look this up ahead of time, I don't know what Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A says about special permits in period of validity and extensions. This is what I see in the zoning bylaw.
That's what I was talking about. And I don't remember about state law, but, I know that that's our law. So somehow you managed to get 2 years on out of a bylaw that we can't
Right.
change.
We voted 2 years for whatever reason,
Yeah,
maybe
but-
because we didn't read the bylaw quite carefully enough, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, or we didn't think about it because of the site plan. But in any case, our extensions of what we have done have been for 1 year, basically under that same guideline. So I think that's probably where we need to go.
Through Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay.
If that's the board's practice, it's the board's practice. I would suggest that the nature of this project is somewhat different than others that you may be dealing with under similar circumstances. You know, a residential development, construction commences when you start infrastructure, even though you're building for X number of years after that. You've had plenty of experience of that. And a smaller structure is kind of, get it done and get it over with. To build a facility of this size and to get all the pieces in place, it takes time. And so.
But this is only to commence, not to complete.
Correct.
And commencing, not necessarily terribly different between anything. In any case, I'm not sure where our authority to exceed the bylaw is, and we probably were wrong before.
Yeah, let me just to sort of complete the discussion about what the law allows. I just looked at chapter 40A, section 9 on special permits. Without reading it word for word, it says that we can grant a special permit for a period of not more than 3 years. And
To commencement, 3
Yes.
years to commencement
yes,
of work.
and it's explicit there about not including the time to resolve appeals, which is consistent with what we're talking about or what we've done. If a substantial use thereof has not sooner commenced except for good cause, or in the case of a permit for construction, if construction has not begun by such date except for good cause. So good cause kind of gives out.
So we didn't violate state law, but we violated town law.
Yes, our zoning bylaw perhaps could maybe, could more explicitly address questions about extending periods of time for a special, but regardless.
Yeah, but, let's, I say, well, we'll see how everybody else feels, but I think give a year and see what happens.
Yeah.
I've been puzzled because I think I'm still seeing signs up there for sale, aren't I?
It's for sale or lease, sure. I mean,
Oh, does it say lease?
if you want to buy it, it's for sale. If you want to lease it, it's for lease.
Well, the lease I see, but.
So Justin has his hand up here.
So on the extension, I'd be okay with 2 years. I just say it out loud, but for the reasons that Mr. Donahue had described. But if the board feels any member feels strongly about the bylaw and how that is written, or if we can't do it, I'm more than happy to grant for 1 year on that point. I do have one question, Mr. Donahue. It's not really germane to doing the extension, but I'm just interested if you would reasonably anticipate a future need in the next, 1 to 2 years of doing a modification of the special, of the plan because of those changing conditions. If you're prepared to say that anyway, not committing you to anything, just curious if there is a likelihood of a site change.
I guess like the way I can answer the member's question is almost every user that you talk to looks for some level of change to the prototypical building that's there if they're going to use the whole thing. Whether it's changing the number of loading docks, making some of it office space and the like. So a modification wouldn't surprise me. It would be great if we didn't have to go through that process because obviously not coming before the board, but there's obviously cost to be incurred in redoing the entire building plan set
Of course.
and the like. But it won't surprise me if we come back. In other jurisdictions and other matters we've had of buildings this size, I would say the vast majority have required a modification from what we originally approved, basically as a speculative building.
Thank you.
On the topic of extension times, I'm remembering one project not so very long ago where, for a variety of reasons, I think we ended up granting several extensions of time for reasons such as business conditions or financing issues, priorities of the applicant in question had several projects going on at the same time. Changes in ownership, sale of the applicant, the company to another company. And I think every time as I recall, we were willing to extend because we could see there was some prospects, although nothing had happened yet. The applicant convinced us that there was a prospect that things could happen. And in the end, the latest applicant on that basically gave up. They just, we're not able to pursue this any further, so they allowed the permit to lapse. So the board in the past, I think, has been willing to grant special permit extensions as long as there's a reasonable prospect of the project, getting off the ground.
Yeah. But, that's all fine.
And I think we did that one, as I recall, 1 year at a time.
Yes. And I couldn't vote for more than 1 year, given the bylaw. I don't know, does anyone want any public on this one? Or other input?
Any other?
I'll just quickly say, I think 1 year, and with assessing what the prospects are a year from now in terms of that to extend again or not, makes sense to me.
Yep, I think sort of following up on this, not specific to this project, as we might want to, take a look at the apparent inconsistency in the zoning bylaw for 2 years for a site plan approval and 1 year for a special permit. That's something that we can consider sometime in the future.
But not tonight.
No. For now, let's work with the zoning bylaw as it is.
Here's a plan. Since it's the law.
It's 1 year is certainly better than no years.
Yeah.
So we'll do that as long as the board recognizes that we very well may be
Yeah.
back here giving you a status report, and we'll be glad to do that.
I'm happy to make a motion to grant 1 year and, whatever we need to say regarding the change of address and so on.
Somebody has their hand up on Zoom. I'll just allow them to.
Oh, Prabhu.
Yeah, hey Dave. So all the conversations, I'm in alignment. 2 years appears to be too long. With 1 year, I would want to see if it is feasible to have an update some point of time mid-course, not wait for 1 year, come back after a year, and then figure out that we have made progress or not made progress. This was a constant topic. I remember having conversations earlier also that when we approve, we don't know what happens. It seems to go off in some la la land till we get a request back for either extension or the project is done. So if we say, I'm for 1 year, but I would like to have an update mid-course, say after 6 months, as to where are we? Are we making any progress or not? And all reasons could be genuine, valid reasons, and I appreciate that part. But not having any insight doesn't seem comfortable.
We'll be glad to submit at least a written update, and if the board wants more, just let us know. We'll be glad to come. So.
I still have my motion made.
Yes, there is a motion on the floor before
No,
we.
was it seconded?
Not yet.
I don't.
There is a
Yeah, we do have a hand up on Zoom.
Hi, Leanne Gagnon, Maplewood Drive. I just want to ask if this is something that's being reopened, is there a possibility of taking the opportunity to get a sound or a noise study done this time around? Since last time we kind of missed that opportunity to see if a building of this magnitude so close to a residential area would have a problem.
Yeah, I don't think that would be within the scope of the request that's before the board tonight. The request for before the board is to change the address in the permit and to extend the time period. Anything else would not be within the scope of what we're able to talk about tonight.
How about recognizing the motion and then we can be discussing the motion and having input on it? Or not?
Well, a motion has been made.
And this, I'm just, to be clear, there's not a public comment piece of this, it's just, we can, I mean, I second your motion. if we
All right,
pass the
motion made and
public comment.
seconded.
No. Public
And-
comment or anybody's comment.
And Leanne, did you have anything further?
No, I guess I just don't understand quite the process. So if it's kind of extending the permit, at what point does the permit lapse? Is it just at the judgment of the planning board?
Yes, well, what we're discussing tonight, the motion on the floor is to extend the permit for 1 year would it be 1 year? Well, anyway, to extend the, I want to make sure we nail down the exact date. But
1 year from when the current permit,
when the current permit expires.
Right. So if if they continue to come back and ask for extensions, is there ever an opportunity to go back and kind of fine tune it, maybe get another traffic study since it's not during COVID times? Like I said, get a noise study since that was a missed opportunity during the first planning board meetings.
There, if, as has been hinted, if the project is modified, if the design of the project, whether it's the building layout, the number of loading docks, or if something about the project design is modified, that comes back for a public hearing and consideration of the entire modification. There, depending on the nature of the modification, there could very well be an opportunity for additional, whatever studies the board deems necessary. But without knowing, without knowing what that modification might be, I can't speak to what would be included in the scope of the hearing for that.
Does the site plan approval need to also be extended? Because it's 2 years. So I'd ask for consent to modify my motion to include the site plan.
If the
Second.
seconder agrees with that,
Second.
all right.
Mr. Chair, if I may add my understanding as well to Leanne Gagnon's question, is that the special permit and site plan as we approved it is, as long as the board continues to allow for extensions, is considered to be an allowed use based on our decision. Any modification that might be proposed would be weighted against the change of the modification against what the decision was. So for example, if the traffic is expected to go down based on a basic traffic analysis from a change, it'd be assumed to be within scope of what we originally approved. That's essentially my understanding of how that.
I don't understand how what we're doing tonight would get to a point where there was anything like a change in a traffic study. You'd have to go to the full modification
Yes.
process, and
yeah,
that's not
my
part
answer-
of our motion.
My answer was what Ms. Gagnon had asked, but beyond that, I'm more than willing just to move on. I just wanted to provide a little more clarity from my understanding.
I wish you had a different microphone. My,
So, Leanne, your hand is still up. Did you have anything more?
No, thank you. Thank you. Just, I actually, one more thing, and I know I kind of understand, but if you were like to deny the extension, then they would have to come back and we could kind of possibly add some of these things back in. Is that what I'm
I'd have
understanding?
to start over.
Yeah, start over basically. But thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, you technically have to close the public hearing. It's a modification.
Oh, it is a hearing. I move we close the hearing.
Second.
So that's a substitute for the other motion?
This is,
Let's see.
Already motion made and seconded for this extension for 1 year special permit
the
site plan
motion
approval.
to extend both. We had an agreement from the
Right.
mover and the seconder to include the site plan.
Yep.
And,
And-
agree or whatever we have to do for the address.
Right,
1 year.
1 year, yes. And as far as closing the hearing is concerned,
I move that we close the hearing. And if you want to,
make that all one motion?
yes,
Second.
well, you agree that,
So double
add that to the
So,
motion.
Let me restate the motion. The motion is to close the public hearing and
Address,
issue a draft decision with incorporating the address change and approving the extension of 1 year for both the site plan approval and the special permit.
And, yes.
That would be to January 15th, 2026, which would be 1 year from the
January
present.
15th, 2026. All right, any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger,
aye.
Mr. Delamole,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. And Fiona will do the paperwork. As let's see. This was an official modification, so we have to Is there an actual draft decision, a decision that we have to then vote on?
Yes.
Let's set the vote on the actual decision, but we did make the approval as far as the actual extension. Now,
Yes, so Fiona will draft a decision for the board to formally vote on at the next meeting.
Yes.
I don't think, I think we just voted to approve it. I don't think we need, I don't think there's gonna be a lot of language that we'd have to review. We can
Right.
vote to do something and then she can, put it through.
I'll keep it short, Bob. I'll try and keep it short.
But I don't know that we need to have another vote.
to your point, Bob, I'm willing to move that we authorize the chair to be a final approval step on this decision based on the board's discussion and vote,
Okay, I second it.
So,
if the chair is willing to.
so pre-approving the draft decision as drafted by staff and reviewed by the chair.
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Okay,
that was moved and seconded.
that's a motion.
I move the question.
With no further discussion. Any yeah. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkataraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. So as soon as Fiona gets that done and reviewed by the chair, we'll send it out.
Okay. It's a miracle we get anything complicated.
All right, now we get to our second and last public hearing of the evening, for which
Continued.
Attorney Donahue gets to stay right there.
Comfortable.
Now I recognize you.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
That's good. And this is a continuation of the hearing that we opened back in June. And got a couple of updates.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. With me this evening to answer any questions the board might have is Jonathan Klingon from Prologis. Mr. Scott is on PTO. We have not worn him out yet. He will be back for the next meeting if we have one. John Perry from Langen Engineering is online, as is Robert Michaud from MDM Transportation. It's been a mere week since we were last before you, but I think it's fair to say we've accomplished a fair amount in that time. And let me at the outset both thank and congratulate your planner for yeoman work in producing a draft decision for a fairly complicated project that has a lot of issues with it, and working closely with the town of Shrewsbury. There's not many people in the Commonwealth in her position who would be able to do such a good job. Since we were last before you, we had talked about some of the planner's remaining issues that were set forth in a memorandum. We submitted a formal writing with regard to that dated October 28th and provided responses, but we talked about most of those at the last meeting. Glad to review any of those that you have. We had some discussion at the end of the last meeting concerning post-occupancy monitoring and how that related to potential responsibility for future work. Prologis took that into consideration with United Parcel Service and has stepped to the plate to basically try to resolve the traffic issues with regard to this project. You'll recall we had originally offered a mitigation payment toward traffic mitigation to be implemented by the town on the proportional analysis that you would use for other projects, or had heard from other projects. That had us doubling what that came to $150,000. We've taken the comments from the board to heart and considered it. I've also considered the benefit for the project, and are now prepared to make a contribution of $750,000, which by an order of magnitude prepared by MDM Transportation would be the present day cost of implementation of a full signalization of the intersection. And that order of magnitude has a 25% contingency in it. So it kind of has inflation for whenever the town decides to do it. We can talk in the decision as to when we would do that. With that, we still have post-occupancy monitoring of the traffic, and we could talk about it in the decision. We propose at our driveway. That's what's important, that whether it's consistent with our analysis or not. If our analysis consists, or if the results are consistent with our analysis, but some more distant intersection is still impacted, it only follows that it's impacted because of other developments and not ours because we projected it at a certain level. But we're still glad, as is indicated in the draft and in the letter, to look at the transportation demand plan to see how we can change that, including shift looks and the like, if that were to occur with the increase. So it's a significant step by Prologis to demonstrate its commitment to the community. We would hope that the town could implement this work promptly so that it would hopefully be in place for early 2027 when the facility would start to operate, so that the traffic from UPS wouldn't be making the situation any worse. And with that, we've had a chance to review the draft decision, have a few comments, but as I said, it's a very well done piece of work. Glad to answer any questions the board may have.
Do we say when the town actually gets the 750?
Oh, you actually want it?
Well, when do we get it? Because they can't spend money until they have it.
Sure. And you know, we can certainly try to figure that out so as to where it stands. You know, it right now calls for upon a certificate of occupancy for the building or any phases. That gets into a little bit of nomenclature under the building code as to what constitutes occupancy versus completion, because the nature of this building is that it's going to be built kind of in a sequential fashion, and a portion is going to be completed so that United Parcel Service can go in and start doing their work inside the facility. That's not a certificate of occupancy, but you know, we can. You know, our suggestion was to have that language, but also to provide some vague language for discussion with whether it's the Board of Selectmen or the Department of Public Works on a specific timing.
Yeah, no, when I read, not in the decision, but in the letter, I guess it was, memo, it said, it was saying that the job had to be finished by a certain date in 27. And I'm not entirely comfortable with that, unless the money, assuming the money were to be in hand right away, our department could move ahead and pursue the project. But I'm a little worried about the having the timing work out or not have a back end on it for a limitation. See what I mean?
Sure.
Fiona had touched base with the DPW on that.
Yes, so I Mr. Chair, spoke to the DPW director, who said, survey and design and like the bidding process, should this move forward, relatively quickly, could be complete by fall 2025 and awarded. That's like if everything worked out perfectly, and didn't see an issue with the timeline as presented. But obviously, that is with the understanding of what you just said, that the sooner we get the money, the sooner we can start executing
But the survey and design and so on can't go forward
yes.
till we have money.
Right. No, understood. And I think, yeah, that's in a perfect scenario, should we, be able to get something by the end of this year. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not basing that on anything in particular, but we could start that in earnest. This is a high priority for DPW, so as soon as we can move on it, we will.
But
Or they will.
someone's got to sign a purchase order, and they're not going to sign it, I know, until he sees the money to spend.
Right.
So I think that needs to be covered.
So that's one of
Did they give a sense of, so there's the design piece of it, right? And then there's the actual construction, installation of the light itself. Is there an understanding of the estimated time for each of those?
No, he was,
Or is it, she's just saying altogether about a year from now, if you
more
get
than
going
that.
right now?
The surveying and design would be a year from now. The construction, we didn't get too into the weeds with those specifics. But he did say overall he didn't see that there would be an issue with trying to get this done by the timeline that's presented.
The hope is that, the light's functional by the time
Yes.
impact is happening. Which is
Yes, right.
2027.
I just want to be sure
let me make a proposal that might solve everybody's issues. And I think these are I think these numbers work for everything. We would make $100,000 contribution of the 750 within 45 days of starting site clearing. That's scheduled to start in late December, early January. So we would be providing that money, in first quarter of 2025, which is, I think, certainly enough funding that it would all fall in place. We would pay the balance of 650 with a certificate of completion. Certificate of completion means basically the shell and core of the building are done, the framework. That is presently scheduled for May of 2026. So we would be paying that pretty much at time at which I assume the contractor would actually start work, because I assume they wouldn't start till spring as opposed to winter of 2026.
But they can't sign a contract to do the work, do the construction until they do have the money. They don't know, we've just seen people run into delays, projects run into delays, sometimes big delays. So
So that notion there suggests that the 100K would be funding the design
right,
part of this.
and that's fine, and they
So-
can get busy on
So
design.
So with a design in place, we're not gonna put the project out for a bid for construction until we have the remainder of the dollars in hand.
So if that only comes when there's a considerable completion, then you start to try to get the lights put in. It'll be a year after you've gotten to whatever this point is.
So if the 650 comes in May of 26, as an example, allow the better part of a year for construction. So that could push completion of the signals into early middle of 27.
Through
That's
you,
what it
Mr.
takes,
Chair,
yeah.
if we have a little bit more flexibility than from May 2026 to December 2026, I think that would be favorable. Just giving us a little more ability if a portion of funds could be available in 2025, because I don't know the exact construction timeline and how long it's going to take, but if we can
Yeah,
stagger a bit, or
It might be that we could be clearer on the consequences of a decision if we had an estimate of the design costs, which throwing out 100, that might be right. I don't know. I didn't. Anyway, whatever. So the other part of that is an estimate of the time it would take from getting the remainder of the money to completion of the project. Is that a full year? Is that less than a year? Do we have a sense of that?
Well, I think, as opposed to the board getting triangulated into that discussion, that's a discussion that would make sense directly with the applicant and DPW at some time in the future. And by that I mean that it's important that the decision tie the contribution to the project actually proceeding, and not just say you got to pay it as of January 2026, because if for some reason, whatever that reason might be, the project doesn't proceed, I can't have a decision that says my client's required to do something. On the other hand, if in those discussions it indicates that it's a 12-month process to put in the light from the time that we make the contribution, then Prologis and UPS will have a choice. They either wait for the certificate of completion, make the payment then, and recognize that means work's going to be going on in the spring of 2027, or they advance that payment because the DPW said if you advance the payment, they'll get the work done in advance. That's a logistics issue. Your decision should just say we're obligated to pay it by a date certain.
Yeah.
That maybe could work. I mean, just thinking here. So the way you've described it, that kind of, it's up to Prologis as to when that light is done.
Right. It's going to happen if they want to advance because it's more convenient for their tenant or the user. they can cure that theoretically by talking to DPW and making the contribution early.
So rather than us setting a specific date in the permit for when the light must be in operation, we would be, per your suggestion, we'd be basically setting out the requirements, leaving the schedule kind of loose.
Correct.
You know, cementing the obligation in place,
We have to pay it with a certificate of completion.
but,
We can pay it.
right.
If it makes sense to pay it early,
Yeah.
nobody ever turns down money early.
So if we nail down what has to happen,
Yep.
but we leave when it has to happen, not tied to a specific date.
Yep.
That gives Prologis some flexibility. It gives us the assurance of, having something, unless of course the project is abandoned, in which case, all bets are off. But that's.
Well, we'll have done some design work in the meantime.
Yeah, and even if we get some design work done and then for whatever reason Prologis doesn't proceed any further, we've got a leg up on ultimately getting a light there, because I think in the discussions we've had, it's been pretty well acknowledged that that intersection needs a light.
Yep.
And this would be a neat way to get it if we can, if it plays out the way we're hoping, or you're suggesting it would.
Just part of my concern about the timing is every year it costs more to do the same thing. So the longer this stretches out, the less likely 750 is gonna do it. You know what I mean?
True, but there is a 20% contingency of call it $125,000 in the order of magnitude. So
If,
in getting to the contribution, in building that by the pieces, it includes a contingency for unknown of 20% or $125,000. In addition to the specific costs of, for example, pavement, sidewalk, curb, edge, and the like, which are all taken from present bidding costs. So while the cost may go up or go down in some fashion, the contingency is meant to kind of cover that in some fashion.
would that cover the traffic light though?
I don't see any reason it wouldn't, because I think the traffic light infrastructure that's here is based upon actual costs in other circumstances, but Mr. Michaud's here and can answer that question more directly.
Oh, okay.
And so just so I'm keeping track of everything, what was the milestone for the lesser amount, 100 grand was?
Would be
What?
within 45 days of the commencement of site clearing.
Okay, and then the remainder,
Would be upon the issuance of a certificate of completion, which is a term that was used actually in a meeting we had recently between the two building inspectors, Ms. Coughlin was there, as to what's obtained in this process. And that's basically the completion of,
Site clearing is gonna be in the winter?
yes.
And
Fiona, I mean, do we feel pretty confident that 100,000 is going to be able to get some kind of planning activity going that's significant? I mean, because I think what Bob's concern, and I share it, is that if you go too late and you just get started, then whatever you discover, it's harder to manage it and what have you.
Yeah, no, that's a valid concern, Greg, and I do believe that 100,000 should cover it, and I believe that is in one of the peer review reports, or it is that language and that figure specifically is mentioned to cover 100% design.
If we were to talk to town administrator and whoever else gets involved in deciding what roads to do what to, how to spend the whatever it is fund we have. Imagine that if there was a little flexible, you needed a little something that they could, having watched our town administrator a few times, I think, it's just that I think we need to cover it as we've been talking.
Okay, so have some language with that understanding.
We're not going to actually decide the language tonight, are we?
No, but
All right.
so I have an idea what I'm writing.
Okay, because there's too many Too many balls.
Justin, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. So, Mr. Donahue, I saw the phased plan. My question on this one point is, when you say site clearing, are we talking the start of phase one site clearing, or are we talking the entire site being cleared? Just to make sure that we're on the same page.
Mr. Clay might be able to answer better.
The start of,
The start.
yeah, the start of site
It-
plan.
it's
The first time a bulldozer goes,
Basically, the first shovel hits the ground.
Don't look for the check that.
That's as would have expected. That's why to verify that we were talking about the same thing. The second point I want to make is that I share some similar concerns to Bob and losing my mind today. All the rest of the board
Greg.
on just the timing and costs a little bit. With the rate of inflation has been relatively high in general, and some of these costs could go up above 20%. That said, I also look back at the fair share contribution and calculations, and this is significantly higher than that. So I'm confident that this is a reasonable offer from my standpoint. The other slight concern I have is doing the road construction to enact the light. If performed after UPS is operating at this facility, that would put more pressure on the intersection itself. But again, we know we need to do some site work for that intersection, whether or not this project moves forward. So I think that is not something that I would hold up any sort of approval or vote on this decision for. Just wanted to say those thoughts out loud.
To the member's point, you do have a commitment, although it's tied obviously like this is to starting the project from 5 millennials for a contribution.
Yes.
Which will provide additional funds, assumedly for the same purpose.
Yep, sort of thinking, worst case, unexpected cost increase or whatever. This contribution of 750,000, we can reasonably expect it to cover at least most, if not all, of the cost of signalizing here. And I think it's to the applicant's credit that they're willing to offer us sufficient funds to, for all practical purposes, guarantee that we can, assuming things go forward as expected, pretty much guarantees that we can afford to put a light there. I think that's a lot.
it's amazing how much signalization has gotten more costly. I can remember some of the first signalizations in town were in the 100 and something range. Now we're talking for a really simple intersection, pretty simple intersection, talking $750,000.
Yep.
Of course, they're nicer signals, but and they have LEDs in them, don't they? But
Still a traffic light. It's still just a
It's
traffic light.
still a traffic light.
But what the order of magnitude is basically a comprehensive. I mean, it includes $144,000 for milling and resurfacing the roadway too. So it's
Yeah, so it is including, right, yeah, it's including sort of a,
sure
kind of a
town can spend it
maximum,
how they want.
a maximum estimate of the work that may be required in and around the road. Yeah. Do you have something, Fiona?
Yeah, Mr. Michaud is on, and I just would like to get a confirmation from a transportation engineer that design, that I didn't misspeak earlier, and that 100,000 is adequate enough to cover design and survey.
Certainly, through the chair, Robert Michaud, MDM Transportation Consultants. The $100,000 ballpark is likely where the design itself would land. There is a need for survey here. Survey for an intersection like this, which would include not only the geometrics and the layout, the curbs, but also the topography and other elements, would typically range between $20,000 and $25,000. So I think, as Attorney Donahue had pointed out, there are other sources of funding that will also be applied to the same location. I believe it's $32,000 or so from the Five Millennium Project, which could cover that type of additional anticipated cost for the survey. So it's really at the discretion of the board as to how they would like to apply the money between contributions made by others and this project. I would say that as a good planning number, one that I'm sure wouldn't deviate. $150,000 number was thrown out early in the planning process for this as the approximate cost of both the survey and the design. So I think the $100,000 is not unreasonable, but you need to also factor in the cost associated with the survey, and that I don't have a specific number for that, but based on my experience and the experience of my firm, that would be between $20,000 and $25,000 for the survey.
If that's what it is, we'll increase the initial contribution to 125. I mean, it's important to us to get the design done. If that's what it costs, that's what it costs.
Right, and to Attorney Donahue's point as well, the estimate that we put together, of course, includes that 20% contingency, but it also is a comprehensive update to the intersection itself. It's not just the signal, it's the curbing around the island features, the regrading, milling and resurfacing. The most significant component of that is the mill and resurface, which we anticipate for the entire intersection. So when this goes to a bid process, there is an opportunity to value engineer the work to a point where certain elements may not be absolutely necessary to arrive at the functionality that the town's looking for. First and foremost, you want it to be signalized. Of course, it would be nice to have mill and resurface. You'd essentially have a brand new intersection, but components like that can be scaled back depending on when construction actually happens and what the bids actually are when they come in. So there is some flexibility in this. You might also recall that there was another engineering firm that had taken a stab at an order of magnitude cost estimate. Their estimate was about $100,000 less than what we are now estimating in this number. So we're very comfortable with this as an appropriate budget. It's not completely inflation proof, but that's why we put a contingency in there. And it is value engineerable, if you will.
Yep, and on that topic, value engineering and, incorporating the, some of the pavement work here, we would also, our DPW would also look at this together with any other plans that they may have for roadways and resurfacing. They may choose to use some of our Chapter 90 money or whatever for some of this as well. So, however that fits into DPW's plans for these roads, that has to be taken into consideration.
I hope all of the infrastructure that runs in the road is in the road. We've been going through digging up that road over and over again in one section or another for years, putting in water and sewer.
Well, just to try to maybe we can bring this aspect of the discussion to a close here. I think what Attorney Donahue is proposing that his client would be willing to do is an initial payment, $125,000, say, when site clearing begins, when the first shovel hits the ground, and then on or before that certificate of completion to provide the remainder of the total of $750,000. That gives the applicant some flexibility to balance whatever their needs are with the date they would like to see the signal and the intersection work completed. But I think it sounds like we could write that into the decision pretty much in those terms. Gives us something we can count on. It gives a certain amount of flexibility. We're not baking dates in that don't need to be baked in. Sounds good to everybody? Any other comments on that particular topic? I think you got some good guidance there, Fiona, for us as to how to incorporate this into the decision?
Yeah, I'm feeling good about it.
You always have the recording.
Yes, when in doubt.
So have we beaten this subject to death for the
Yes.
moment?
Yes.
It seems
Yes,
like
we
it seems like we're all comfortable with this.
I think so.
And what else do we have to talk about? I know there was still, like, last I knew, we still needed to sort of close the loop with the fire chief.
Yes, so, and through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, so I just wanted to make sure that the fire department was all set. The chief seemed to still think there was an issue with hydrant location, so John and I have been chatting, and I know John is on. I wasn't able to get an answer from the fire chief today, because we did receive a complete plan set, this morning, and he only had time to look at it now, and we didn't really get to touch base. I think that the confusion is that there's one fire department connection that's located in the truck washing station, and maybe he's not seeing that. So I am going to try and get some consensus on that. But John, maybe you can just confirm that we're not missing anything, and that your fire engineer has touched base, and we don't necessarily need this to, I guess, hold up this moving forward. Because I don't really think that it's a cause for concern. That
Yep. For the record, John Perry from Langen Engineering here, and as Fiona mentioned, we were coordinating on this earlier today just to confirm that we will have a fire hydrant within 100 feet of the fire department connection, and I have confirmed that. And if you recall, we will be putting in a fire pump or the fire loop within the truck wash building. That serves the whole facility. It serves the warehouse building, the truck wash, and all the ancillary buildings. It just happens to be where the fire pump room will be located. So that's kind of the main source for the pressurized fire supply for the site at that point. And so at that point will be the fire department connection, where they can actually hook up their trucks and backfeed the fire suppression system if they ever needed to. So I did confirm with the fire protection engineer that is where the FDC will be located, and it is the only one required.
okay.
Yeah.
Could you follow up question through you, Mr. Chair? So John, only one is required, and the hydrant is to be added, or is
It's on the plan now.
on there? Yeah. Okay, that's
Yeah, we added it with the set that we sent you this morning.
okay. Just want to make sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Because we have to have something in writing on the record
Yep.
that the fire department is happy.
Yep. I'll follow up again with them.
We just need to hopefully get a response from the chief. Make sure that the chief is in agreement here, or that if there's still a disagreement, it still needs to be resolved.
The source of the water for firefighting is what? Public water,
Grafton Water District,
Grafton Water District.
Grafton Water District. What about on the Shrewsbury side? Still ours?
Grafton Water District.
Still us. So hopefully they have enough water.
Yes, we are.
It could be brown water though.
We are supplying water. Shrewsbury is the first fire, actually the first fire, the closest.
Yeah, I know.
So Shrewsbury will be using our water to fight the fire.
Yeah, well, the hydrant, whatever, this connection is on the Shrewsbury side, right? The truck washer's on the Shrewsbury side.
Truck washers on the Shrewsbury side. That's correct.
So this famous connection is actually on the Shrewsbury side.
Well, I mean, the connections for the entire facility. Most importantly, it does a firefighting capacity for the entire building. And we've had detailed discussions amongst the chiefs as to the size of the valves and dealt with all of that.
Yeah, I just want to be sure you could use a whole lot of water if there was a big fire, continuous flow of a whole lot of water. I'm sure they know, and they've got the base covered, but I just capture that. Really.
Justin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have one topic I just want some clarity on as well. Fiona may already have the answer to this too, but there was some outstanding questions at least leading into this weekend on MIPA's jurisdiction. Do we have any update on that, Mr. Donahue?
MIPA.
We're continuing to work with MassDOT to get affirmation that the position of the applicant is concurred with by MassDOT. That position is that there is no curb cut permit required because of the location of the site. That's the only possible applicable, and we'll work through it with MassDOT. I don't see it as an issue for the local decision at all.
Okay. Yeah, my next question was going to be how would that impact us if there was a jurisdiction with them? And
Not at all. I mean,
Okay.
whatever process that requires us will be required under the MassDOT permit. So
okay.
All right, so what else do we have? Are there any open issues on the post-construction monitoring, traffic monitoring? Have we nailed that one down?
I thought so.
Mr. Chair, so the applicant did provide kind of their comment on the outstanding language that was in the decision. It's essentially unchanged from the discussion that we had last week. I'll have Bob just confirm that, but from my review, it's the monitoring program is going to be 1 year. At the 1 year mark, the 3 year mark, and the 5 year mark, and if that 10% and then the subsequent 5% thresholds are exceeded, then your team works with the town to provide the data and kind of analyze what the issue is, but will not be, responsible for providing any improvements or funding any improvements from any of the study areas outside of really like Pine Street and Route 30 in Grafton. Yes.
Through the chair again, Robert Michaud, MDM. So yes, Fiona has correctly pointed out that the language really hasn't changed. I will say that the only location in Grafton that would come into play with that structure is Pine Street at Route 30. There's no chance that the study would need to be expanded beyond that location, given the percent change in volume that we've already calculated that has been subject to peer review at all of the remaining locations that could ever come to play along Route 30. So Waterville Street, for instance, et cetera. So as a practical matter, that monitoring program was structured so that it would be paralleled or mirrored, if you will, on the Shrewsbury side, where there's a higher level of impact, and there's at least some potential that the monitoring would need to expand beyond the intersection of Route 20 and Centec Boulevard. So it's a long way of saying that we've covered all the bases on the Grafton side with the language that's currently being proposed. And I think we've resolved the issue at the single most impacted location that is of concern to the town.
I do hope I don't know that we have to write it down any place, but if we get to a point where the selectmen feel that they're getting a lot of pushback down at 30 and 140 in North Grafton, that you folks and they can get together and talk about, maybe you have to encourage your drivers to not go, something like that.
sure. I mean, the non-economic changes that we can make will be open to if we have an impact due to our traffic exceeding what the model is.
Because I can imagine that coming up, they'll want to, probably it's them, not us, that would want to be able to have UPS come in.
Yeah, I think, it was my sense from reading, the proposals and everything, that what we're talking about is if UPS generates more traffic than was projected, We've
By
just,
more than 10%.
I'm not gonna try to repeat everything we said, but, yeah, the end result is, UPS will do what they are able to do within their own facility. Traffic demand management, signage,
Yep.
and for any impacts beyond, outside of the project itself, you guys will work with the town to discuss and evaluate what might be done. That kind of gets to what Bob was saying, that, if there are, I mean, bottom line, or bottom line is probably the wrong word for it, but, if the measurements at the site driveways are showing that the traffic is not more than what was projected, there's no reason to think that this project ultimately would be contributing to something outside
Correct.
the project itself.
Correct.
Nevertheless, there may be questions, and the town may want to have some discussions with the UPS, but
Sure.
I mean, you'll have with these traffic monitoring studies, there'll be some data that can inform those discussions.
They have a similar thing with the railroad. I think every so often they have to have a chat with the railroad about that that intersection, particularly.
I'll add to that. I think the likelihood of people in the town, even with our current traffic study and numbers, thinking that there is a outweighed perception of impact on that Route 30, Route 140 intersection because of UPS is, to me, fairly likely. The fact that UPS has branded trucks and vehicles that would go past there, and the fact that people have their perceptions of what they see around, that could impact that perception of impact. Even so, to me, we also need to look at the data for sure, and that's what the decision is describing. So I'm just articulating that I would not be surprised if there was public comment saying that it's bigger than it really is, because of data would be driving that answer for us.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss? And we have a rough draft decision in front of us. There's enough work to be done on it that, I don't think any of us expect to go through the draft decision and finalize the language.
No, I don't disagree with that, and I think to the extent that we have remaining comments, we can work with Ms. Coughlin to do that. What I would like to know from the board is whether, in your review, whether there are any areas that are not addressed by the drafted conditions that the board wants addressed, so that we're not starting that discussion for the first time about something else on the 25th.
No, like the things I mentioned tonight are just, I don't have any other big issues.
Yeah, it's just, at this point, if we're all comfortable that we understand generally, that everything is covered by the decision, although we have to work out some more, a lot of the detailed wording, but if all the topics are adequately covered and everything is generally to the board's satisfaction, then we can basically say that all we have left to do is the wordsmithing on the decision to make sure it says what we want it to say.
Yeah.
If that's a consensus of the board that all of the various areas are dealt with in the draft, in the existing conditions, then the wordsmithing we've got time to do, and we'll do it appropriately before the 25th.
Yeah.
I do have two things on the conditions to briefly talk about before we depart today, but I think they're likely to be more favorable to the applicant, in my opinion of them, than otherwise, but we can talk about them if we're closing. We do that first. Or I could talk about them now. It's up to you, Chair.
If they're favorable to the applicant, go right ahead.
I didn't
So the first note was from Fiona on the conditions A, saying the conditions about if the applicant owner shall sell or to rent, sublease, etc. I think that condition of providing the decision is something we want to have in our conditions. That to me feels favorable to the applicant, just in the nature of it's clear what happens if there is a sublease or such of a tenant of the project.
That's in the good neighbor policies.
I
That's 31A.
Right.
I missed that in 31A for sure, but thank you. The other one is A10 that I had is the success, their successor and assigns will not sell or rent any space in the development until construction. I'm wondering if we want to add use in there as well, not just sell or rent until infrastructure is in place to adequately serve such space. I didn't catch if we have that defined in there, but that was it's probably a relatively minor point, but it's
I'm sorry, what point was that? On
that
A10.
Yeah, so I think, Justin, you're saying the condition as written says the applicant will not sell or rent any space. You're wondering if it should also say the applicant shall not use any space. Is that?
yes. I don't imagine that any space will be used until the infrastructure necessary, etc., is in place anyway. But it was always a
Well, I think
A,
technically the
condition 10.
technically it would be more appropriate to strike sell or rent and refer to it as actively use. And the reason for is there's going to be a lease that's going to be in place very soon.
So
be
actively
fine with me.
used covers however it gets used.
Whatever the legality, it ignores the legalities and gets to actually the effective use of the facility.
And I think that's what that condition is trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, I think that language makes it irrelevant how it's actually used or who is actively using it.
and that works to just my point. So that works. And then I think I had one more that was interesting. Number A18. I know what this is getting at because like large stockpiles of sand, etc., is not permitted. My one comment and thought for the board and the applicant is this specifies no quantities of sand compounds shall be stored on site. That's no quantities at all. I imagine like when I used to work in retail business, we would have a few buckets of sand that we would spread on walkways for staff and potential customers for our place. We just won't have customers coming to the location, but would this preclude that ability for UPS or any tenant to store small quantities that they would spread by hand? Because I think that this might need a slight rewording if that's the situation.
Mr. Chair, this was a recommendation. The Shrewsbury folks, they have this kind of as their standard condition. And I thought just water supply protection overlay, it seems appropriate, but I would definitely welcome any information from the applicant as to if this makes sense for their operation. This is not something that we typically condition, so I
What do they use? Salt?
think so.
Salt works.
Well, brings up an interesting question. The two compounds mentioned explicitly there, neither one of them are sodium based.
Well, let's not get a chemistry course going. Ca.
Calcium chloride, calcium magnesium acetate. Those are. Now, calcium is a
Sodium, I see what you're saying.
Calcium is often used as an
Oh,
alternative.
wait a minute.
Yeah, calcium-based,
Sodium-based is salt.
yes.
Sodium chloride.
More and more in recent years, it's my impression that calcium chloride and various calcium-based compounds are more often used for roadway de-icing than salt-based. You know, it used to be always just salt.
I
And we
think,
still call it salt.
but no, I think he's right. 18 needs a little thought. No sodium-based de-icing compounds means you can't use salt, but then when you say such as the other kind, I think that sentence needs to be studied or checked back with.
Why don't I suggest that we get information from the operator as to what they've done in other parts of the country, what their standard operating procedure is. We'll get that information around so everybody can see it ahead of time.
If it came from Shrewsbury, maybe you want to touch base with Shrewsbury and ask them if this is the way their wording works. Because our chemistry class,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I think.
my secondary point to the sodium and calcium piece was, like I said, the sand compounds shall be stored on site, no quantities means to me, you can't have a few buckets just spread of your walkways for employees entering through their walking from the parking. And yeah, the primary driving space is to me a different thing. You definitely don't want to have big mounds of sand or salt or calcium chloride or whatever. But having the ability for some hand spreading or like a manual spreader kind of work for people that are walking as employees is to me usually good to have available.
but let's let Fiona
Yep.
find what the right answer there
We
is.
need to, yeah, we need, among other things, I would like a better understanding of why this condition would be important. I do know that, and this kind of goes back to my days on the Conservation Commission a long time ago, we used to frown on the use of salt adjacent to wetlands and waterways. Because the salt compounds had a deleterious effect on some of the vegetation.
Yeah. I'll
And
confirm.
sometimes on water supplies even. I've seen low salt areas on roadways adjacent to reservoirs used for public water supply. So a better understanding of the point of this as well as the details would, and we're not going to work that out tonight.
We need to know what the objection to calcium is.
Yeah.
Does it hurt? In any case, maybe Concom knows better than we do.
Yeah, so let's get some expert opinion, and this certainly isn't going to affect whether the board approves this. It's just
Just get it so that it's good.
we're
All right. Is there anything else we need to do?
I just had one on the water topic, right? Like, and this is 40 exhibits back, but so there was just kind of a no comment email from South Grafton Water District. I mean, was there
South
an actual?
Grafton?
That's what it says, South Grafton.
Well, they don't have anything to do with it.
South Grafton
So
would be expected
did
to
Grafton-
comment this because it's not their water.
So was there? Am I missing the comment from the Grafton Water District, or?
They didn't provide a response comment, but they've been working with the applicant on hookups and have been.
Yeah, just because I mean, I
privy.
understand it's not a facility that takes in a ton of water for a process that's happening on site, but I just want to make sure that the Grafton Water District understands the additional demand and whatever, I know it's years away, but
Yeah, I
obviously
can
it's
get something in writing. I can push them for something in writing. I've already have to follow up with the fire department.
I think it would be good to just hear that what their involvement, record what their involvement was, and that they're aware of what the demand increase may be for their planning, right? So
Through the chair, if I could chime in, and I can shed some light on that too. We've been coordinating with them for a while now,
Grafton.
multiple months. Grafton Water District. Yep, we've had several meetings with them. We did send them a will serve letter request, probably even before we submitted our applications last May, with demand requests, and they've confirmed in writing. We actually have documentation from them that there's no issue with capacity, things like that. So
Yeah, is that included somewhere in some of the project documentation? Like some of the there's I think there was a fairly substantial, one of the early documents, kind of the project narrative or whatever it was.
Well, do we need to worry about it? Because if the water district can't provide the water,
I mean, it's-
or won't provide the water, then they've got,
Well, I mean, it affects the other people that want, water from
Well,
Grafton Water District, right?
but
If
actually,
they've been working, my point is only if they've been working together, which it seems like they have, that we get some kind of documentation of it, that just so we know they understood the potential demand and that they're saying that they can handle it.
well,
We'll see what we've got in our file from them.
Yeah, I mean, if it's already buried in a document that's already part of the process, that's.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll check.
actually, the South Grafton Water District, I can think of a narrow way that they might be involved if there was a major, like a fire flow needed. Some years back, we finally got an interconnection, as I understand. It was a major undertaking to get
So another story, isn't
get them to connect. Yeah. But I guess some water, I think of the Great Fire down in South Grafton, and they had water flow, when the factory burned down, the mill burned down. They had more firefighters than they had water, I think. Well, they drain, like they drained the river or whatever.
It sounds like we have a likelihood of at least one or two more documents we're going to want to get in our record from the fire department and maybe the water district before we close. And it sounds like we will have a more polished draft decision that we can likely vote on at our next meeting. So, Mr. Donahue, if you are requesting a continuance to November 25th, which is our next meeting, I believe, then I will move that we grant your request to continue.
As long as we can make sure that all the members are satisfied that areas
Yes.
of concern are down to wordsmithing as opposed to being added at this point.
I guess, I think everyone else sort of said yes. I haven't heard from
Okay.
Prabhu yet. Prabhu?
I'm good with this. I'm happy to see this out
Good.
50K. In terms of the logistics or additional traffic, I'm in alignment with the traffic study that was done, and overall, I'm good with this.
I think
So
that was everybody.
we're certainly open to a continuation to the 25th. I will tell you that the 25th is important for the project schedule, that we hopefully reach a conclusion that night on a decision and you vote it. Mr. Klingon and I have a weekly meeting with UPS. I'm hoping I could tell them that we're moving toward an approval, based upon this evening's discussion.
I'm hopeful that we'll have a usable draft decision, be able to close the hearing and do it.
Great.
Yeah, I don't think I heard a second to Justin's
Second.
motion. All right, moved and seconded that we grant the to-be-received written request to continue to November 25th. My understanding is that there are at most two documents yet to be received, one from Fire and one from Grafton Water. Although if Grafton Water is adequately documented, adequately referenced in the existing documentation, we don't need another document. So, but we'll figure that out. But other than that, those are two just dotting the i's and crossing the t's. So we have just to confirm that we have no substantive issues that the board wants to argue or discuss or negotiate with the applicant here on the decision, that it's really a matter of cleaning up and completing the decision. You had something, Fiona?
No, I just wanted to just not belabor the point, but yeah, there is nothing we are waiting on or anything outstanding. I think the biggest issues or really cause for concern was the mitigation package, which was discussed, and the monitoring program, which was discussed. So I will get the information, add it to the record. If board members want to share comments, wait until the 25th, or they want to send me an email and I can do a red line or something. I think it would, whatever strategy that is, either way, it'll be viewable for the public. But I do find that it's, if somebody does want to send me comments, if you could send it sooner so that I'm not trying to finagle something
Friday
Oh,
with a lot of
before the meeting
different
is the earliest that you can,
yeah.
is the earliest we can.
Yeah, right. Anything. I mean, but just to
No,
no
I
major
move the
concerns wordsmithing now.
I,
Just the-
I will have a number of sort of details.
Yes, I
I'll
figured.
probably do something like, maybe I'll send you a red line version of what we've been discussing tonight.
Yeah.
Whatever, I'll get something to you early enough that you can, consider incorporating it into the final draft.
I move the
Perfect.
question.
I'm assuming
If someone
anybody,
would say,
anybody else is willing to send Fiona something that she won't turn it away.
Right.
There is a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Hassinger.
aye,
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried. Thank you for all your time and your patience.
for your time.
And
Appreciate it.
it sure looks like we can wrap this up in 3 weeks.
Thank you. Have a
Gotta
good
hold
night.
you to it.
And, yeah, you got what you think you and your client are gonna need from what we did tonight?
Yeah. I mean,
how
we're-
close are you in Shrewsbury?
We are planning to make our final presentation of any evidence on Thursday, this Thursday, and have a decision. We're working with the planner, who's also working with Ms. Coughlin, to have a final decision ready for adoption at the December 5th meeting.
Okay.
We plan to have all appeal periods started by December 6th to meet the schedule.
Sounds good.
So, yep.
We're getting there.
Yep. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I do believe that we're at that point on our agenda where we ask.
Move that we adjourn.
Second.
Move to second that we be adjourned. Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned. Thank